Hey there, it's Melissa Brunetti, and welcome to the Mind Your Own Karma podcast. Hey there, Karma Crew. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Mind Your Own Karma, the Adoption Chronicles. I just want to say real quick, we will be approaching 100 episodes at the end of summer. And that is super exciting, a great milestone for Mind Your Own Karma and myself. So thanks so much for hanging in there with me through all the changes and the twists and turns. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. So let's jump right into today's episode. Today, I have a very insightful young man, Frankie Coan, on the show today. Let me tell you a little bit about Frankie. Frankie was born in Seoul, South Korea, and adopted at 5 months old to a family in Portland, Oregon. Being adopted has posed many challenges in his life, most of them still unresolved. However, over the past couple years, he has been working diligently to try and heal himself from the wounds of his past. Through deep self-reflection, support from his loved ones, and the willingness to be a better person, Frankie has come a long way. He thanks you for listening to his story today. Here is my interview with Frankie Coan. So we're welcoming Frankie Coan to the show today. Hi, Frankie. How you doing?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you.
Awesome. So let's just jump right in and tell us what you know about the circumstances of your adoption.
Well, I know that I was adopted through an agency called Holt. I think they're an organization that hosts a lot of adoptions in Korea specifically, South Korea specifically, but maybe other areas in Asia. And I was adopted at 5 months old. I was in a foster care system up until when I was born, when I came to the United States. And yeah, that's pretty much my story. I don't know too much beyond that. I think I had a broken collarbone when I was born. My bones were soft, and so I think I did have some like medical issues right at the beginning, and which kind of, I don't know, complicated things in terms of just needing, attention and whatnot. So
Yeah. So you don't know the circumstances, like why your mother gave you up, or you don't know any of that stuff.
yeah, they kept that pretty private, unfortunately. Yeah, and especially in Korean culture, I think, I don't know, this is like the story, but like they had me out of wedlock, and that's very frowned upon in Korean society. So yeah, I I I assume that it was kept pretty secretive, my birth. So yeah.
And then you were saying the agency that you were adopted through, was it all kids from Korea only, or?
I think no, I think it was pretty big in China as well.
Oh, okay.
Um, yeah,
So mostly Asian adoptions.
yeah, Asian adoptions holds. Yeah, it's the Asian.
And then were all those children coming to America or all over the world? Do you know, through that agency?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was primarily to the United States. There was a big like kind of movement in like the 90s, where a lot of children were being adopted from Asia, and Holt was one of the organizations that hosted a lot of those adoptions. So
And do you know why your adoptive parents wanted to adopt?
Yeah, sort of. My dad's side of the family had a lot of trouble producing healthy sperm, basically.
Okay.
So there was trouble on that end. So it was going to take a lot of like, medical procedures to
Right.
enhance that. And my parents didn't want that. And um, I think, yeah, I got lucky with my parents because they really, they're very kind and understanding of like hardship, I guess, in a sense,
Mhm.
and really want to make a better life for, you know, their friends and family. And so when they were thinking about having kids, I think adoption was always kind of on the table, even
Mhm.
despite the medical complications. So yeah, yeah.
So
I really
they never had children of their own then.
nope. Yeah. I have one other brother and he's also adopted from Korea. So
Oh, okay. But you
yeah.
two aren't related. I mean, biologically.
No. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why did they decide to go through and adopt from Korea?
Um
Because they're not Korean, right?
no.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a great question. Yeah, I really don't have
Not
the
sure.
answer for that. Yeah. But
And so you just have one other brother. They didn't adopt anybody else and they have no biological kids.
yeah, no biological.
So this might kind of sound like a dumb question, but since you don't look like any of your family members, because they're Caucasian, your parents, right? Your
Mhm.
adopted parents.
Yep.
Did you, when you grew up, did you know that you were adopted?
Yeah, my parents were very open about, um, having me embrace my adoption.
Hmm.
Um, Now they were open about it. I embraced it to an extent, and then it took a while for me to actually come to like to full acceptance of it, I think. But yeah, so they were always open about me being adopted. We would celebrate something called a coming home day.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like the day I came to America, and my mom would bring Korean food into the elementary school or whatever, and
Oh, that's cool.
yeah, just celebrate that day. So
So you
yeah,
kind of touched a little bit on struggling with coming to terms with being adopted. So talk about that a little bit.
yeah. Um, I think it really like boiled down to when I started middle school. Just adolescence in general is hard,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to figure out your identity and whatnot. And I was I was pretty harshly picked on for being Asian
Mm.
at my school, which was predominantly white, and so it confused me more so than anything because I would go home and look at my parents, and they were white. Like I have 20 cousins, they're all white. I'm just in a white family,
Yeah.
and so being bullied for being Asian really kind of made me start to resent my ethnicity.
Mm.
And I, developed very self-deprecating behaviors, um, and I, I didn't like the fact that I was Korean. That was really hard to um, to navigate. So, um, yeah, I think um, it really just uh, kind of like pushed me away from a part of myself that was inherent,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that disassociation, like anyone, right? This disassociation from yourself causes a lot of problems just in general, about finding out who you are and what your values are and what you care about and what your morals are. And so it took me a really long time to really understand that, um, you know, I'm not just Korean, or like I'm not just an adopted kid. Like I'm me. And
Yeah.
so I really have that deep sense of myself because of like the because I got pushed out from like who I was kind of at a young age. So
Yeah. Kind of lose your authenticity and start questioning who you think you are or who you should be against who you really are. So how was your life then growing up in an all-white family? Was it weird? Did you feel different? Did you feel like you fit in?
Um, yeah, that was like when I was little, it was great. Um, sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, it was good because I was accepted and um it was my grandmother who, I mean, she made everyone feel like they were the most special person in the world. And
Mm,
it was, I think when I was going through that hard time, um, she was I could always trust that she was always going to be there for me.
mm.
And I had my problems with my parents because just child
They're your
parent,
parents.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. Um, but when I would see my grandmother, um, you know, just full embrace of love and kindness and compassion, um, no matter what. It was just unconditional. And so, um, you know, I always trusted her no matter what.
Mm,
The other people in my family, it wasn't as like, I never felt as stable of a relationship with people in my family
mhm.
because um because of kind of the loss of myself. And I didn't trust anybody. And um, but but she was always there. So
Mm, so important. So you did talk a little bit about being able to celebrate your culture within your adopted family. Besides the day that they got you and brought Korean food, did they embrace the culture at all?
yeah, sort of. You know Culture's so deep, right? I mean, we got food was a big part of the culture, I guess. And then um my uncle actually married a Korean woman.
Mm,
And so we kind of have that tie. And so we'd go to her parents' church occasionally. And it was all in Korean, so we didn't really know what we were talking about. But
Great.
it was cool just to be around, you know, people who kind of looked like me. So
Right.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So your sibling was also adopted. How did you guys get along growing up?
Mm, um, Not great
Yeah.
on my end. Yeah.
You
the
were older.
I'm the younger sibling.
You're the younger sibling.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And I think part of that difficulty of resenting my ethnicity, my brother was the archetype person that I saw in myself that I hated.
Mm,
And so he was, and I wanted to destroy that part of myself, so to speak. And so whenever he would, whenever I would be upset, or I get picked on that day, and I would come home and I'd be so angry, and I'd take it out on him.
mm,
And so it was a tough, it was a tough relationship just because for him, on my part, um, because I just saw him as something that, I didn't like in myself.
yeah.
And I let him know that. So yeah, that was too bad. I have a lot of regret. I have a lot of regret for that.
How
So,
do you guys get along now?
um, I we don't interact really too much. He lives in Canada, with his wife, and he actually just got married last year. I remember, going up to him during his wedding and just kind of breaking down, crying, and
Mm,
saying, yeah, I'm just sorry. Uh,
yeah.
so little by little, I'll pick away at mending,
Yeah.
healing that relationship. But yeah, tough.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about how you kind of, lost yourself and your authenticity in junior high, and you're still a young guy, but do you feel like you've kind of embraced who you are, or are you still trying to figure that out?
Um, yeah, no, I've embraced it. Um, and I really feel, um, you know, there's plenty of things that I need to work on and become more self-aware about. And, it's not over. But I
Hmm.
think fundamentally, um, I know who I am, and not just the good parts, but like the darker parts. And it's taken me a really long time, but I've slowly been able to kind of accept those parts about myself and integrate them in ways that I can use to um, to kind of move through life. Um, life isn't easy, so sometimes anger is necessary. I had
Hmm.
a lot of anger when I was a kid, but it would come out like an explosion when I was younger. Um, and I've worked really, really hard about learning to become aware of it, learning to use it in ways that are useful and not destructive. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So I think you had mentioned in an email to me that you said it confused you because your parents were Caucasian. What were you meaning by that? What were you thinking?
Um, yeah, or yeah, like the kids who were picking on me. I mean, it was almost like um, um, not humorous per se, but it was confusing because culturally, I'm just an American white kid.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I grew up. I was fortunate to come into a very stable family, and I had a good childhood with sports and um, summer reading programs and friends, and very, very, very typical um, American childhood. And so then when I would get bullied for being Asian, um, like I had to wrap my whole head around it because I didn't identify as that, and yet that's how I was being perceived.
Right.
And so it gave me a very deep understanding about the psychology of perception in general,
Mm-hmm.
especially from a child's point of view or a prepubescent, whatever, adolescent. Um, and so perception is very important. And so um, yeah. Anyways, that was the confusion.
Yeah. So the anger that you carried because of the bullying and that kind of thing, it sounds like it was more from the bullying than anger from being adopted, or was it kind of both? Were they kind of intertwined?
Yeah, I think I think the anger came mostly from the bullying because it was unwarranted. Um, and but if I were to actually think about like adoption, like my adoption, and I can't really think about it when I was a kid because I didn't probably understand it all that well. But I feel just so grateful.
Mm,
I mean, it's almost indescribable, right? I mean, I was born and then put into a system that I could have been adopted by anybody.
yeah.
And I'm going to pat my parents on the back here, but I have probably like the most modest and humble and hardworking, you know, parents that I could ask for. And um, it probably saved my life.
Mm.
So
Yeah. It's kind of funny how as adoptees, we're told that we're lucky a lot of the time. And it is kind of like a lottery. A lot of adoptees are told them, that we chose you, but actually you were just the next one up for adoption. Like you weren't chosen. Most of them, most aren't. I mean, I have heard of people that were there with, 5 other babies, and then they were chosen out of those, that group of babies. But most of the time it's basically winning the lottery, when you get that great adoptive family like that. Cause I mean, there's so many adoptees that don't have that story. I'm one of those too that won the lottery. So
Nice. Yeah.
yeah. But I mean, it could have been, like I said, it could have been anybody. It could have been literally anybody.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you get along with your adoptive family or your, adoptive parents. Yeah, that's great. Have you ever searched for or can you? I don't know would you even search in Korea for biological relatives?
Yeah, it'd be difficult. Again, I think it comes down to that, like the cultural element of that having a baby out of wedlock is dishonorable. And so I could go through the organization, but I think it's up to the birth parents to choose whether or not they would want to meet up. Personally, I've had no desire to meet my my birth parents, because yeah, I just think um, it wouldn't, like, I don't feel any resentment. Well, that's maybe not true, actually. Yeah. Interesting. Um, yeah,
Know, right?
I don't think it would give me kind of the like. Um, I don't know. I actually haven't thought about that question actually in a while. So
Yeah.
I don't know where.
Do they do DNA over there, like ancestry?
Probably. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you think you've suffered any trauma from your relinquishment? Do you have any residual trauma from?
Um, Probably. I can't highlight exactly what it is, but the question that preceded this one kind of invoked this thought of, well, I have tendencies with attachment that are very that coincide with a traumatic experience.
Mhm.
And so, I had a pretty good childhood in the United States, but that's not to say that, it wasn't hard the first 5 months.
Yeah.
And especially, I think the disconnection from my birth mother. I think babies need that chemical bonding
Yeah.
or other. I didn't get it. So
Right. So you're in your 20s. Yeah.
yeah, I'm 26.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, most people don't really that doesn't really start hitting home most of the time until like your 40s and 50s. It seems like, from what I've seen out in the adoptee community, it's kind of like almost like a midlife crisis, really. But it's about your adoption and just trying to come to terms with all that entails, including looking back on your life and being like you were saying, attachment disorders or problems with attaching, and oh, that's probably why I do that thing I do, that I don't really like, or that's not really serving me,
Mhm.
but that doesn't usually come along till later, it seems. But I think the community is kind of coming out now and talking more about what really happens with adoptions, and so I think the younger generations are getting there a little sooner
Hmm.
now. So it's a good thing, because I wish I had kind of explored it when I was younger and kind of gotten through a lot of what I've had to deal with. But I haven't had to deal with a lot because of my adoption being so positive, that I see in the community so many people hurting. I'm just like, oh my gosh, it just breaks my heart, because I can't imagine some of the things that they've been through. It's hard enough just being adopted, like you were saying, and being relinquished and taken from your birth mother and coming to terms with all that. But then when you have a bad adoptive experience in the family that just, it's horrible. So I'm so glad to hear a positive adoption story today. So you told me your experience with adoption has taught you many things about life. What has adoption taught you?
I think the most profound thing that I've learned is that family can be anyone.
Mm,
Um, like it's not determined off of blood per se. And so, the love that my parents showed me and the love that my grandmother and all my family have been very, very supportive and encouraging. And, um, um, they want the best for me. They care for me. So, um, it really drove me to see the world in that kind of lens and to understand that, um, if people struggle. I mean, everyone struggles, right?
mhm.
Life isn't easy, and it's and you need people to be there for you
Yeah.
through all stages. And so, it drove me to. I'm in school right now to become a clinical psychologist,
Mm,
mental health therapist, and so, um, I want to be that person, you know, who somebody can turn to when they're having a tough time, because I was given that, um, from these random people who adopted me,
right.
so yeah, it's just taught me family can be anyone, and that showing somebody love and um, showing love can really turn a bad situation into something beautiful.
Mm,
And and I was given that opportunity, and I want to pay it forward as much as I can. So
yeah. And I mean, adoptee therapists are being highly sought out by adoptees.
Hmm.
So, yeah, that's exciting that you're going to be doing that. So, I kind of touched on there's a lot of hurting adoptees out there.
Hmm.
What advice would you have for those that are struggling? I mean, you kind of went through um, the bullying and then losing your authenticity and then kind of learning to embrace it again. What made you turn around and like want to embrace who you were? Was there something that happened? Were you just sick of not being who you were? Did you realize you were not being who you were? Like what happened?
um
Because you're pretty young to be like,
yeah.
realizing all that. So
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, like, how did you do that?
um I mean, the first thing that kind of comes to mind is that I was sick of the person who I was becoming.
Mm,
So through all that turmoil and all that uh um adversity, um I started to become very nihilistic and cynical, um and narcissistic, I think, as well.
mm,
It was all about me, me, me. Why me? And um, and so I would blame people. I it's your fault. This is why I am who I am, or this is it was this situation that made me who I was. Um, and I don't remember exactly, when it was, but I really started to realize that um, I didn't like who I was becoming.
mm,
Um, I was hurting people around me. I was hurting loved ones. Um, I was hurting myself. And it was only until I realized that it was my responsibility to take care of my life, um, that I really started getting into the getting into the work of self improvement, so to speak, or self healing and self growth. I would say.
So what specifically did you do to start that healing and growth?
um, I started to, I think it started with humility, was the main thing. Um, I got into some trouble, and I actually ended up spending a night in jail.
That'll wake you up.
Yeah. And I just remember my phone call with my dad, who's a criminal defense attorney.
Ah.
Um, and he wasn't all that proud of me at that moment. And so, I was I was in handcuffs and feet cuffs for the whole night.
Wow.
And I was thinking in that cell, like, how did I get here?
Right?
And I was like, I thought about it and I was like, well, I got myself here.
Mm.
And that's when I realized, like, I'm the only one who can get myself out also. So
Yeah.
it's kind of symbolic for my own self-imprisonment,
Mm.
and for ultimate liberation or transcendence, or whatever you want to call it, of the corrupted self.
Mm.
um, you I had to take responsibility for my actions. And that's what I started doing.
And so what did you do after that to start that journey?
Okay, so this is a good segue, I guess. It was Buddhism, actually,
Mm.
the structure of Buddhism that really helped me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Buddhism. It's not a religion per se. It's more like a way of life, is
Mm-hmm.
how I like to describe it. And it talks about um, that life is hard, life is suffering. That's the first noble truth of Buddhism. It's like life is really, really difficult. And I'm like, okay, I agree with that. You don't have to tell me twice.
I'm on board.
Um, but the fourth noble truth, second noble truth is why life is suffering. The third noble truth is that there's a way out, and the fourth noble truth is that this is the way.
Mm.
And uh, one of the principles in the fourth noble truth is right understanding, and it basically, this is the humiliating part, is you have to become aware of the reality of the situation. You can no longer delude yourself into thinking that the world careened around you to torture you for however many, whatever, your whole life. But that the things that you did um, had a cause and effect,
Yeah.
and the effect can be positive or the effect can be negative. And
Yeah.
yeah, anyways, so
Interesting.
yeah.
And then you are interested in becoming a death doula. And I've just been hearing about this recently. It sounds like an up and coming thing. Do you want to explain that a little bit? What is a death doula?
Yeah, death doula is basically, I would say it's like a emotional mental health counselor for somebody who's um, in the dying process.
Mm.
Um, you know, um, Death is one of those things that it's it is the thing that is the ultimate unknown, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And when people are approaching that stage in their life, um, the death doula is there to um, empower and support um, the person through their process. So things like, what do you want to do after you're dead? Do you want a burial,
Mm.
cremated? Do you want to do this? Or something a little bit more difficult would be having a safe space to talk about the emotions that are, bubbling up um, for that person in that time. And they're very, very unique to the problems.
Yeah.
So
I had a friend stay with me who was terminal. I
mm,
didn't know she was terminal, but it ended up being that way. Um, and my biggest regret in that was when she would start to want to talk about that kind of stuff. I would just be like, nope, we're not going there. We're not talking about that because that's not going to happen. And I would just cut her off like, nope, we're not talking about that. And that's my biggest regret, that I didn't give her that space to talk about it.
mm,
Yeah. To this day, I'm just still like, why did I do that? I did it for me. It was a selfish reason. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to hear it. Um, but yeah, to this day, I still feel horrible about that. So how do you learn to be a death doula? Is there like a class, or is it through your psychology classes? Is this like
um,
something new that they're teaching, or do you just,
mm,
I don't know. What do you, how do you become a death doula?
yeah. So the kind of the um, I guess like professional way you become a death doula is that there's like several different certification
Oh,
courses
okay.
that you can take, each one kind of varying a little from the other.
Do you have to have a psychology background to do that?
No,
No. Okay.
and that's kind of the other prerequisite, which is kind of it's not something you can. One of the prerequisites basically is a predisposition, like naturally,
Hmm.
to be able to talk about death.
Yeah.
And so I've had a lot of death in my life in general,
Mm.
and I've always had an inclination to not look at it as something that I lost per se, but um, more as just a part of life. And I was always curious about it. So, and that was when I was really young, really, really young. So
Mm.
I've always been fascinated by death, and which has kind of allowed me to hold those spaces for people to talk about it because because I'm interested in it, as opposed to, I think, maybe the more normal thing would be to be scared of it, and I don't know,
Yeah.
have that much fear about it, but I don't. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So the other thing that you do is you do Dharma talks in your area. And I don't think a lot of people even know what Dharma is. So do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, Dharma, in the kind of like the sense that I'm talking about it, is just the teachings of the Buddha. Um, I'm gonna go. So there's three jewels of Buddhism. There's the three jewels of Buddhism. The Buddha, which is the goal, and that just means the enlightened one or the awakened one. So it's self-awareness.
Mm.
Um, the Sangha, which is the community. So that's who helps you along the way. Um, and then the Dharma, which is the teachings, and that's how you get there.
Mm.
And so the Dharma class is Buddhist Buddhist principles, kind of in the lens of daily life is what I teach. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. I love talking about that stuff.
Yeah. Do you follow Buddhism at all?
I kind of take a little bit from here and there, but mostly, yeah. I don't know a lot about the intricacies of it like you do, but the philosophy of it, I think, is what I embrace about it. And like I said, I just, whatever feels good to me. And that changes, as I get older too, is, oh, that, maybe I don't believe that anymore. What I used to believe 20 years ago, I think as you grow and change, that kind of changes as well.
Hmm.
So, is there any advice that you would have for adoptees that are struggling?
Um, advice. It's kind of cliche, but I think trust your gut is something that I would tell people
Yeah.
just in general. Um, and that means you have to listen to your gut. It's easy to get caught up in like everybody else's voice,
Mm-hmm.
but if you can quiet the mind, um, and find your intuition, um, listen to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, listen to that. Mhm.
Is there anything else you'd want to share about anything that we didn't cover? I think we covered it.
Yeah, no, I think, yeah, this was fantastic. I really enjoyed this. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on today and sharing your story. We're educating the world, and one story at a time. Whether it's a good adoption story or a bad adoption story, they're all educating the world about what really happens with adoption. So thanks for sharing today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
This was such a sweet interview for me. I have not interviewed someone so young and yet wanting to work on himself and be a better person at the age of 26. So many adoptees don't even realize that their adoption is affecting their entire lives until we are in our 40s and 50s. But I'm telling you, because we as adoptees are coming out and telling our stories, we're getting the word out about adoption and how it affects us. It's going to help these younger generations realize it quicker than we did. And this is the whole reason I do this podcast, is to educate the world. But this young man at such an early age is wanting to be the best version of himself, the most authentic version of himself. And he wants to work on it at such a young age. It's so inspiring. And during the interview, as I was asking Frankie questions, I could just feel him thinking about what I asked and just trying to dig deeper. And I'm sure as the weeks pass after we did our interview that he will continue to process and learn from what was asked of him during this interview. It can be such a heavy topic, and I don't usually give my guests the questions ahead of time unless they ask, because I like the interview to be spontaneous. I don't even do a pre-interview with anyone. Sometimes I don't even know what my guest is going to look like. It's new and fresh, and I love the spontaneity of kind of just doing it on the fly like that. I think it's more real, it's more authentic, and that way there's no scripted answers. It is just on the fly, truthful, whatever pops into your emotions and mind in that moment to answer that question. So for me, it just feels like it gives a more true and authentic flair to the interview. And I've had many guests email me afterwards saying, that question you asked me, I thought about it later, and this came to me and that came to me, and it really got me thinking and processing. So that's why I do it in this style that I do. And it is my hope that some of the questions I'm asking my guests get you to think and process about your own situation. And I hope it helps. I know that hearing adoptees' stories can be so validating, but I hope that you are asking some of these questions of yourself that I am asking of my guests, so that you can get something out of it as well. And speaking of answering the interview questions that I'm asking of my guests, have you thought about coming on the podcast and telling your story? Trust me when I say there is someone out there waiting to hear your specific story. And your story will help so many others out there. You have no idea the impact that you can have on fellow adoptees and those in the constellation. If you would like to get a hold of me, you can email me at mindyourownkarma@gmail.com. If you want to know more about me and the podcast, you can go to my website, mindyourownkarma.com. If If you have been enjoying Mind Your Own Karma for a while now, please subscribe to the podcast. It really helps the algorithms and it helps get the word out about adoption. As always, take what you need and leave what you don't. And always remember to mind your own karma. I'll see you next time.